Without further ado, this is Leadership Lives. This is our second Leadership Live. And in Leadership Lives, we have a roundtable discussion every Saturday at 9:30 a.m. SCT, Central Standard Time. We have a special guest in our Leadership Live, and the audience is part of the conversation, so don't forget to type in the comentarios box any questions or insights that you may have. In these lives, we talk about a type of language that very few people talk about. Most people don't even know it's there. Smart directors and leaders, though, use it every day. They make it seem easy, but they work hard at it. They talk the walk when everybody else is focused on walking. They focus on the secret language system, the one hardly any English teacher teaches, pronunciation, because they know that we make sounds when we speak, and that it's the rhythm and music of intonation that hold the meaning in English and not the grammar. They talk the walk, they know what they're doing when they open their mouths and what to listen for when they open their ears. This is the language you need, the language to lead. And today we have a very special guest, María Luisa Castanedo. Welcome, María Luisa. How are you this morning?
Thanks very much, Dara. Well, very excited and very grateful for the invitation. Very excited to be here. This is very nice.
This is very nice for me as well. I'm so happy that you accepted, that an expert such as yourself has accepted the invitation. And you have been involved in ELT. María Luisa has been involved in ELT and teacher training for 28 years as a teacher trainer. And that's where I first met María Luisa a number of years ago when she was training in the British Council. But also she's a course and materials designer. She's a licensed tutor for the SIT TESOL certificate from World Learning. She was an ICELT tutor because ICELT no longer exists. Unfortunately, the Cambridge qualification for teachers. She was an IELTS examiner, as was I, and she was a Cambridge speaking examiner, which I didn't do so much of, for over 15 years, and our paths crossed there. She holds, now this is something I didn't know about her, but now it explains why I invited her for this particular live. She holds a BA in chemical engineering. I didn't know you were an engineer, María Luisa, but of course this is, you are so analytical.
You know that I always use that as an example to teach used to.
Oh, you used to be an engineer.
I used to be an engineer. No longer.
But you have that engineering way of thinking, and I didn't know you were an engineer, but it makes complete sense reading your biodata. The way we needed a brain and somebody analytical this morning, really, because we'll be talking about beliefs and myths, and you're the ideal person. She is also one of the most diplomatic people I know. You could have worked in relaciones exteriores. You really could. She's the most amazing mentor, because even when I'm wrong, and or not, even when I'm wrong, it's not quite the way she sees it. You would say, María Luisa, you said that there is another way of looking at this. You would say, I learned so much from her, and I know that today is going to be no different. Welcome, María Luisa.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Dara. And likewise, I have also learned a lot from you.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have worked together in so many different contexts. Now that I think of it, that's lovely.
We have actually, yes. Yes, but we are still, at the beginning of our careers. We're only getting started. And let's talk about the first myth. This is a good one. This is one of my favorites.
Yeah. And
ironically, I know because you're an engineer, you'll be able to deal with this. The answer is not clear-cut, ironically, to this particular myth. So here goes, because there's also a 4-part question about this. So the belief is this, and I hear it from a lot of my students, they say, in real life, we don't use complex language, that they inform me. Is this true, María Luisa, in your 30 years experience teaching? And what do students gain from questioning this belief that we never use complex language in real life? I know in my divorce, I used some pretty complex Spanish, but maybe that was just a one-off. And might there be some times when keeping things simple actually is the way forward? And how do you keep things simple? Right. So anyway, those are the four.
All four questions in one go.
Yes,
So
as you
exactly,
wish.
yeah. As we say in Spanish, it's a very bad joke, a very cruel joke. As Jack the Ripper said, "Vamos por partes." So,
Thank you very much.
firstly, the myth: we don't use complex language in everyday life. Well, I suppose that it depends on what you understand by everyday life. I think that we do, and particularly leaders, the people that you are addressing this training to. I think that they have to use complex language, because complex language gives away so many stories, gives away a whole background, gives away education, level of language, of course, level of language proficiency. But very importantly, I think it is a sign also of complex thinking, right? Complex thought processes. And this, thought processes are mutually dependent, and thought processes and language are mutually dependent. So more complex language allows you to access deeper thought. If you know what I mean. Simply because you have the words to express more complex ideas.
Even if they're in your head, even if you don't. Or can we have an idea? Oh no, we're getting on to another thing. When students say, "I want to stop thinking in English," and I say, "Well, listen, do you really think in anything when you're thinking? I mean, aren't they just thoughts, And I suppose sometimes they are just thoughts of something that you can't even, because sometimes somebody asks you something, right? How do you feel, for example? And you're like, oh, and you can't put it into words, Is it possible to have a complex thought without words? Is what I'm saying, I suppose. In your opinion.
That's right. And there you're touching on the topic of emotions, how you feel. You know that lately, from some years to this point, there is this emphasis on teaching children how to name their emotions.
Sure.
Right. For them to be able to learn also to manage them. So there are all sorts of complex processes, thought processes and emotional processes, now that we touch on that have to do with language. So
yes.
I do think that we use complex language in everyday life. We want to use complex language in everyday life, and very much so if you are in a leadership position, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. And the Americans, who are very, very mathematical, very, very, they love measuring everything. In Europe, we tend to, in the education system, observe. If you can write an essay, then then you can write an essay. The Americans count. They count things, and counting the number of words a child or a teenager knows is key to the Americans.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're saying. The more words you know, the more intelligent you are, according to the Americans. You wouldn't say it like that. Maybe you would say that the more capable you are of complex thought is maybe how you would put it. No.
Exactly.
Right. And coming back to leaders, go on. Yes.
No, sorry. I was going to ask you for the second, third, and fourth part of.
Oh, right. Yes.
Of the question.
Well, one of the parts is this idea that I was going to bring us back to. That okay, so especially for a leader, there are a lot of complex situations, ambiguous situations, and people don't like ambiguity. Leaders are probably able to deal with it. That's why they're the leader. But nobody likes ambiguity or change. And leaders need to explain complex things, and I think, and explain what they are doing using simple language. And that was one of the parts of the questions. How do you keep it simple? Because I think you do need to keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
Because if you go off on one and it's, if you
go off with
you'll understand me because you're an engineer. But a lot of other people are kind of, what on earth? That's super. Couldn't you explain it in a simpler way? And I think the answer is yes, I could. That's something I could do, is explain. And so how do you do that? Does that require what? Okay.
I don't know. I mean, now that you mention it, it is probably going back and forth in complexity, because you might have a complex idea that you would be able to explain in complex language, but then you also have to be able to adapt your discourse to your audience, right?
Yes.
I do not mean to say that, I mean, your audience may very well have a very higher level of language than you,
Yes,
or
not. Might be
engage.
diverse.
Exactly, or might be diverse. So you should be able also to adapt. And this flexibility in the language that you use, this flexibility of discourse, also comes, I think, from your level of proficiency and from feeling sure about what you can do with your language.
And that there are a number of ways of thinking about things, a number of different perspectives. I'm thinking about that speech, I Have a Dream. That's the perfect example of that, right? He speaks, I don't know how many people were there. I mean, the camera pans out, you know, everybody understood exactly what he was saying. Very complex ideas, you know,
That's
even
right.
and challenging.
That's
Okay.
right.
Right. And other parts of the question, I think, yes, what do students gain from questioning the idea that dumbing it down, as they say in the US, isn't always the way to go? Sometimes it might be good to dumb it down and keep it simple in some situations in life, not think too much. But what do we gain by questioning that belief that we should burn the books, you know? Keep it simple.
No, not always. No, do not keep it always simple. I think, I mean, I will go back to thought processes. I think that that's what you gain, and you know that there is also this meta.
Yes.
How would you put it?
Right? Meta language.
Meta language.
Or meta perspective.
And in meta perspective, being able to think about your own thought process.
That's right.
And where it is.
Yes.
And this is something for which you also need complex language. It happens a lot when we're working with our students, and when they are about to give that jump to a higher level of proficiency. When we ask them, what you mean is blah, 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 and they say, yes, but, and you're actually giving them the language. I think that it's very frequent for them to learn vocabulary in that way, because if you give them a more complex, a more elaborate term or structure, they have already a good example, a memorable example to go and research on their own.
Yes.
If I don't know
that's
if
what
I'm
we want,
making...
right? We want them to do it, learn on their,
exactly.
especially
We want autonomy. We want learning autonomy. So if they say, I don't know, think of somebody in a leadership position. I am very sad because results are not good, and we will have to fire 10 people. Yes, that it is in grammatical terms. That's understandable, right?
Yes, for sure. But I might think you're blaming me, that I was responsible for the
perfect
employee.
Grammar. But you wouldn't. I don't know. I mean, I would not expect such a simple language. I am very sad. Results are not good. Whereas, it would be much more appropriate. To say, unfortunately, we have not reached the objectives that we have originally set up.
And it's
we are looking for ways of getting around this, and etc. But it is very difficult to explain. I don't know. I mean, different ways of putting it that that help you share a more round up message,
and get everybody on board to solve the problem, because you're not going to solve it on your own as the leader. You need to actually bring people in instead of pushing them away and blaming them, because you might not be blaming them, but if you say, I'm very sad to say that we don't have the results that we all of the sales team, for example, might think, well, oh, that's us, we did that. For example.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
all. And what did you do, right? What did management do about it? Isn't it too
Right, and
late
then it's the
to
blame game.
notice? Isn't it too late to notice?
Yeah.
But you know that I mean, let's think of what we do in the classroom. What we usually say in the classroom or in a virtual setting as well. We are providing our students with a place where they can safely rehearse all this, right? Where they can get immediate feedback, they can get feedback on the impact of a message, etc.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we use complex language, and why wouldn't we study complex language?
Exactly. Yes, because it's very painful when you have to do that in real life, as I learned with my Spanish. My Spanish was actually pretty good. Then I was a marketing manager, and thank you very much. But it's la letra. What is it? La letra por sangre entra. Is that the expression?
Con sangre
por
entra.
Sangre or con la sangre?
Con sangre.
As con la sangre. You see? Yeah, that's error correction, self-correction. But yes, there are no courses for foreigners to learn the kind of Spanish you need to be a manager in Mexico City. There are courses for us as tourists. That's where we should be. So if you. It's very, very painful learning all this stuff in real life. I would highly recommend that people do it in a safe space. Really, it is. It's tough. People don't hold back. They tell you when you've said something that they don't agree with. Or
exactly. And here we're talking about general structure and general English lexis, right? But if you add the particular terms of a certain domain, industry, whatever you want to call it,
and the discourse,
exactly, it might get worse, right?
Oh, it is worse. Yes. Where are the invitations for Querétaro? I haven't sent them yet, or they haven't been sent. Not even they have. It would. Yes, it would have been that. They haven't been sent yet. Don't say that. You say, I'll check on this, and I'll get back to you later today. Because you're opening yourself up and your team up to real serious problems if you say that they haven't been sent yet. To the sales director.
Exactly. And, bottom line, it's a completely different language. It's a completely different way of expressing things.
Yes.
To be very careful.
You need to address the sales director's need, but you also need to protect your team. Who on the team is responsible for not sending those invitations, and ultimately, the manager. It's just very complex. You want to smooth it over. You want to get it done nicely with no conflict, if you can.
Exactly.
But you need language to do that. You see. Yes. All right, so bringing us on to the topic of Spanish, yes? Forbidden, of course, to learn English using Spanish. That's how I learned Spanish, but of course, I'm very unusual. I learned Spanish a lot of Spanish by comparing it to English, by watching Dawson's Creek in English with Spanish subtitles on Cablevisión. Super, super great way of learning everyday Spanish. And it's, then you've got the complexity thing then. The other day, somebody told me that sesgo isn't in the dictionary. And I was like, in my head, I'm sure sesgo is a word, I didn't say anything. And then I went to the dictionary later. Of course, it is in the dictionary, sesgo. It's just the other person didn't understand it, and they're a Spanish speaker, and I was just using it. And I think I was using it in the correct context. We were talking about results or data or something. But so what do you do with that? But anyway, that's, what's going on there as well, with the whole role of the mother tongue in learning Spanish, which is a second language for me. I've now reached a level in Spanish in some way that, you know what I mean? Is there a relationship between the two, first language and second
absolutely.
language?
Absolutely, there is. And that for the longest time, there has been this myth of the mother tongue is forbidden in the classroom. I think that it has to do very much to our context in Mexico, because usually the most common thing is to have all native Spanish speakers in a classroom, right? You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't think of that in a different context in your country, for example, in a language institution in your country, where you get people from everywhere.
Yes. As a teacher in Ireland, I had people from all over the place. Yeah,
exactly. And people who speak many different languages in any one classroom. But here, I think that myth comes from that. We
Mm.
have to make a distinction between a total prohibition to use Spanish in the classroom, which I find questionable, right? And
Using Spanish in the class, the use of it, you don't like that
no,
as a teacher.
forbidding Spanish in
Oh,
the
forbidding it.
classroom.
Yes, exactly. You're not
Yeah,
allowed to use Spanish.
exactly.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
distinction I want to make is, it is not possible to teach English in Spanish.
No.
At
some stage, there has to be some English there, I imagine, right? Or else, is that what you mean?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that you cannot teach English in Spanish in the sense of you cannot be translating, you cannot, etc. Right? There are a number of terms that are much more economic and clear in English as they are, and you want them to get the meaning of that in English, right? In
Yes.
of different vocabulary and structures and whatever. So
Or even
in
ideas,
my,
no?
exactly, in my mind, these are two different things. I teach English in English, evidently,
Yeah.
right? But there is it is questionable to forbid the use of Spanish in the classroom, right? I mean, simply, teacher, how do you say whatever?
Yeah.
Or when they are at a loss for words, and it is very important for them to tell you what they're thinking about, but say it in Spanish. Say it in Spanish.
Yes.
That's not a problem. That's not
I had
a problem.
teacher trainer in Ireland who used to say to us, actually, at the very beginning when we were starting as teachers, they are elementary level. They are not stupid. These are in front of you. You have doctors, engineers, furniture makers. These are not stupid people. They are elementary.
Exactly.
Give them the language they need. They're very clever people.
Yeah.
You can learn from them.
No, and actually very clever people that already have an advantage. They have the will to learn something that is very complex, that is new for them, but they are thinking of their future selves. Who will I be, and what will I be able to do when I speak English? I find that amazing, just incredible to think of that. And you know that I frequently, when I work mainly with adults, so when I work with them, I try to include always this question. So, what will you be like when you speak English already? Or when you have reached a certain milestone? I don't know. I mean, I took my C1 certification, right? So, who will you be?
Who will I be in English?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is a beautiful book written by incredibly by a musician. He is a conductor, Benjamin Zander. He was for many years the conductor. He's British. He was for many years the conductor of a youth orchestra in Boston, I think. And his wife is a psychologist, and she's also an artist. Her paintings are amazing. And they have this wonderful book that is called The Art of Possibility. Oh my God. Yeah. I think I have an electronic version. I will make sure I send it to you. So there is an exercise in The Art of Possibility. There are a number of exercises. There is one that is a letter to your future self, right? I have used it.
You have to write to your future self.
Exactly.
Amazing.
I have used it mainly with teachers when training teachers. So I give them the date in which we're finishing the course. In 2025, let's say, and the letter has to say, dear, if I am writing it, no, they write the letter to me, dear María Luisa. I got an A, or I passed the course with flying colors, right? Because that's the only language that I give them. And then they have, and of course, everybody thinks of the effort because I was punctual, because I was
a good boy.
a good boy.
The
Exactly.
discipline, no, yeah.
Exactly. But there are many as well. I have some of those letters that I have kept. There are some that get so deeply into who will I be when this happens. What doors will be open. And how will I have grown? There you have a complex structure. How
You
will
do,
I have grown?
exactly.
Right.
And that's, I was thinking about that. That language is not as common as simple language. So I mean, in a way, my students are right that we don't use complex language in real life. We do kind of reserve it for.
You put them in that situation. That's a beautiful exercise. I have tried it,
Sure.
and it is wonderful. Now, when you get them into that situation, you read the letters, you work on the letters with them, and you're not correcting grammar. You're helping them express their ideas.
That's right.
So
there's something here more important than grammar.
Exactly. That is exactly the point. And expressing yourself and being able to share your ideas is more important than grammar. You do need grammar. Sure. You do need vocabulary.
In English, you need pronunciation. You can't say anything without pronunciation.
Of course,
you could write it, but this is written, of course. You see, so you don't need intonation there. The letters, I mean.
Yeah.
But then there's something about the act of writing as well, and anyway. So,
that's another myth.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Which one? Sorry.
I speak English. I can read English. I'm not very good at speaking, but
that's right.
I know English. But no, the written and the spoken language are completely different.
Oh, completely different. Yes, of course. And we in Mexico anyway, unfortunately, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, I know I did it when I was teaching in Ireland. We teach grammar as if it is written, 100% written. And then, of course, students don't understand that grammar when they hear it, because it sounds completely different to the way that it's written,
Absolutely
but nobody
different.
ever teaches that. Well, I do, and you do, but most people don't.
I mean, but how many years have we invested on this? And you know that your students do not have that sort of time. They're not going to. I mean, this is not their line of work.
If they are lifelong learners, they will never stop learning English, and they will never stop thinking about their learning in the other languages, that the Turkish or whoever, God knows what. That you can come into contact with all sorts of languages that you need to learn as you go through life.
Absolutely. There you have a point.
That's what it is. Yes, because they are teachers. They're teachers of themselves. That's actually it's very rare for students to see that,
You know that just a while ago, I was attending a session. I think I told you, and there were people from many places. And there is one participant in this a group that is from India. And she doesn't feel, I suppose, that she doesn't feel very safe speaking in English.
Yeah.
But actually her communication is quite clear. And so she was speaking in Hindi to our facilitator, who also speaks English, evidently. But I was paying attention, and I was getting a number of terms that very much sound like English. Right? And maybe that's the way she uses them, including English terms in her discourse. Again, going back to mother tongue and learning English, I am sure that helps her.
Of course, we're talking about possibilities. If you forbid the use, if you find students, some teacher, give me 10 pesos, you used Spanish, and I'll buy some sweets, and you can, then go to the dentist with all of that, do double virtuous,
Exactly.
If you forbid students from using Spanish, I think you are, or we are, and the students, even worse when the students internalize it and they police themselves. I can't use Spanish, they are closing themselves off from possibility. Aren't they? Yeah,
exactly.
It's fewer possibilities, smaller world, narrower, fewer opportunities as well. Okay, so we have been going for a very long time, so we should move forward. This is extremely interesting. And what would we do if we didn't have complex language? We wouldn't be able to talk about any of this.
Exactly.
So the idea of critical thinking, we talked, I said earlier that that my contrastive and critical analysis of Dawson's Creek, of the subtitles in Dawson's Creek, and using those subtitles, that's how you say, don't do that in Spanish. I of course think that that's crucial to this critical, reflective thinking about what you're learning. Is crucial, especially to get to C1, maybe to get to B1, no, right? Because to get to B1, what is it? It's careful, stand up, can I have a hamburger, please? And what's the difference between B1 and C1, or B1 and B2 even, is that you're able to express a complex opinion and justify it. That's the main difference,
Exactly.
And whether we agree with the thousands of people who worked on that Common European Framework document or not, well, they have said it, the thousands, it's in the document, and in their opinion, that's, as you get higher, you get more complex, So my question is, talking about comparing languages, why are we so obsessed with teaching the tenses and conjugation, and why are our students so obsessed with tenses when they learn English? Because there really aren't. There's only 2 tenses in English, really. But
there is only 2 tenses. Exactly.
And there's no conjugation either in English. In Spanish, conjugation, if you're learning Spanish, you have to learn to conjugate. It's key.
Yeah. That English, many years ago, longer than I care to remember, my teacher, I had a teacher, a wonderful teacher, and one day he told me, that I am reading something in Spanish. He's British. He said, I'm reading something in Spanish. And I said, oh, well, that's wonderful. And he said, I was very close to calling you because there is a verb that I just could not find in the dictionary.
Right. Yes.
There was this word that I needed for meaning, and I just couldn't find it. So what was that word? And he said the word was huir. And the word was huyeron. Huyeron.
Oh, yes. Huyeron. It does exist. That's not the verb is weird.
They fled. Huyeron.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, and what was the problem? And he said, I just couldn't find the infinitive. He was looking up huyear. Right. And I said, no, come on, it's huir. And he turns. It was such a learning moment for me, because he turns and says, and you are the ones that complain about irregular verbs? Think of that.
You cannot speak Spanish without the verbs.
No, practically every verb in Spanish is irregular, either by conjugation, by spelling. Right? And I don't remember right now the third.
I hadn't thought about that before.
Practically every verb in Spanish is irregular.
The spelling is irregular.
Or are you saying the way we say it? And the conjugation as well.
Oh, well, the way we say it in Spanish is the way we write it.
I mean,
I'm thinking like an English speaker.
Exactly. Take the simplest, the verb to go, ir.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the subjunctive, para que vayas.
Well, that's the other thing. You cannot speak French, and you cannot at all, and you cannot speak Spanish at all without using the modo subjuntivo, without the subjunctive mode. It's just you can't. And that's incredibly complex, the subjective mode.
It is.
So we start, at intermediate level, lower intermediate, even starting with the subjunctive. In English, we would never do that with students. We look at the subjunctive at advance. But that's Spanish. It's all about the verb.
Exactly. And that is a very complex structure. Going back to the first myth, that is a very complex structure that you hardly ever use.
Yes.
But coming back to comparative,
in English, no?
In English, exactly, in English. Coming back to comparative analysis and how you can use your first language, Spanish in this case, to learn English. That is something that I think facilitates things. Right. So we keep this premise. You cannot teach English you cannot learn English in Spanish, but you can compare 2 systems to understand how 2 systems work. And you will find many more similarities than differences.
Well, yes, Spanish and English are actually really similar. The American embassy classifies them level 1, which is like, this is for the people who are starting in diplomacy, or even you speak these before you come into the service. It's just taken for granted, especially in the American embassy, that you speak Spanish, right? Because it's just obvious where we are.
Exactly.
French, but French too. That's just de cajón. And they're so simple from a diplomat's point of view, and then to say that they have nothing to do with each other. There are 33,000 words that English and Spanish share. 33,000 cognates, friends. And what do we teachers? And I have done this. I have taught, really emphasized, the negative, the 20 false friends, which of course are important to know about. But what about the 29,980 other things that might be able to, help the students?
Exactly.
But why? I'm kind of getting off the point, of course, as I always do. So critical thinking, thinking critically about language, is useful and gets you to the higher levels.
Thinking critically about language is definitely useful, and it facilitates things, right? To do this comparative analysis, which brings me to touch briefly on a myth that you mentioned last week with my dear Andreina, which is this myth of I have a hard time learning English because I didn't learn when I was a child. Children are better than adults at learning languages. No. The thing is that the situation is completely different. The only thing that children have to do all day long is learn.
Yes, because they don't know anything. They have to. They have to catch up with us.
Everything is new.
That's why they're under our roofs. We have to pay for everything.
Exactly. Everything is new, and everything is. They're curious about everything, and everything is amazing, and everything they are learning and they are experimenting and etc. Whereas as an adult, you have the advantage that you are already proficient in at least one language. Let's think of only those two, Spanish and
we
English.
Invalidate that. The learners often invalidate that advantage.
Exactly.
And yes.
Exactly. I think that's what we don't like, is to feel like linguistic toddlers. Again, I don't know who coined that term. I mean, one of those famous linguists. We don't like to feel like linguistic toddlers.
We don't like looking stupid. Is that what you mean? We don't like being ridiculous.
We feel ridiculous.
Yes.
We feel that we're looking stupid. We're not.
For most people, having learned Spanish, la letra con el sangre entra. Con sangre entra. He's talking about critical analysis. That way that I learned Spanish, there are some people who think that you look and sound ridiculous, and they will tell you and they'll make a joke about it, and that's not nice. But it's 3 cases that I can think of in 25 years. Most people are incredibly generous, and they're listening to what you're saying. So it's us that's magnifying the whole "I look ridiculous" thing, But anyway,
absolutely.
Being an adult, that's what we do.
And as children, as teachers, same thing with our students, right? If the message is clear, why would you correct grammar?
Well, yes, especially in English, because it's the way you say it. You've got the same question, "How are you?" can be said in at least 3 ways commonly in English. How are you?
Exactly.
How are you? How are you? Etc. 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 The words do not change. In Spanish, you have to change the words. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás tú? You need to add grammar in there.
Exactly.
Because of the nature of the rhythm of the language. It doesn't allow. Spanish is a beautiful language, and you can do lots of things in Spanish that you can't do in English because it has 5 tenses. English only has 2. But with the voice, speakers Arabic, German, English, with the stress timed languages, we can do so much more with the voice. Or different stuff with the voice than a Spanish speaker. I don't want to say that Spanish has no intonation, because it sure does.
And you know that, I mean, tip for those people studying English and who are about to get to level C1, or who need to take an IELTS and get a 7.5 or an 8. A very dear friend of mine who was my trainer as an IELTS examiner many years ago, he taught us this. Right, when a candidate, when a student is able to make meaning through intonation, that is completely something else. And we hardly ever teach that, and we hardly ever pay attention to that. And in a formal examination situation, that is taken into account. Not only
It is, yeah.
Exactly. Not only the structure and not only the complexity of the vocabulary, but also the intonation and whether they're able to make meaning through intonation.
That's why the voice is so important when we speak English, which is what everybody wants to do. The mouth is forgotten about totally. Why would we learn pronunciation?
Yeah.
Because you have a mouth. We got to do something with that. Got to learn to use it.
Yeah.
and it's
And you know
it
that
is just so important.
many times many times we lose sight of the big picture, right? And we concentrate on teaching just individual sounds, the individual sounds that do not exist in
Yes.
Spanish. Beginning with a V that in Mexican Spanish we hardly ever pronounce. And I mean the Z, etc.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah,
We tend to dedicate too much time to that. It is important, but we must not lose sight of the big picture, which is the music of the language and how we put words together, and how the rhythm of the language, right?
Yeah, and how that lengthening of the tonic
for example, exactly the meaning words, that the words that carry meaning in a sentence and then in a whole paragraph are slightly louder, slightly higher, and slightly longer than the rest.
So or much longer if it's American English.
Yeah, if somebody is only able to understand that, they will have no problems with comprehension. If they get that trick, look for words that are slightly longer, higher, and louder than the rest, and you will have the words that give you the meaning.
Sure.
So
yeah, I'm just thinking
somebody at C1 level, right, should be able to produce that, not only to understand it, not only to get it orally, but to produce it, right?
In fact, they have to. I mean, the descriptors, they have to have the basics of that. They don't need to be perfect, but they cannot be C1 in an IELTS exam. You and I have been examiners and have assessed, and both chemists. I love chemistry in school. I studied all three sciences, and I ended up studying literature. I was a sciences person in high school. So we love analyzing things, don't we? And assessing. And really the answer, the engineer's answer is you cannot be C1 on the Common European Framework because the descriptors have these things. If you do not have these things, you cannot be C1. Right? Lunch, shall we go for lunch? It's as black and white as that, I think.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I was just thinking, it's kind of happy, very, very funny, and very, very sad at the same time. B2 students don't understand. They really, they don't understand the true meaning of what I'm telling them as a native speaker, and it can be a very lonely experience. It's a fun experience because they don't understand any of the important things that I say. It's all broad brush, general, but it gets very lonely when I'm telling them something that's important to me, like somebody has died, for example, and they just don't get it, because I've pulled it into a conversation about family, for example, and they think that we are just talking about, brothers and sisters, and they keep going with this general kind of conversation, and I say something just in passing, like, God, I really miss my dad, and they just don't hear that at all. Because they're just not hearing it. They're not getting the meaning, because the meaning in that is through the intonation. It's in how I said it. It's
exactly.
Not. My dad he didn't go on holidays or something. You know that from how I said it.
Exactly.
It's not,
exactly.
It's not, I'm missing him these 2 weeks. He's gone. Because I didn't say it in that way. And that's what you have to do. Be able to do the basics of that if you're going to be C1. It's not about the verb. It's not about the verb. It's about the voice, isn't it? But I'm not sure how many people will really ever understand that, says Dara, using sentence stress and intonation and sighing.
We have to point it out. We have to point it out, and we have to send them hunting for examples, right?
Yes.
You made me remember when I was preparing for C1 again. many years ago, I learned this structure through which you express annoyance at what
Oh
somebody
yeah.
does. So he is always forgetting the keys.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
he would never put the keys on the
Yeah. That's not a
hanger.
statement of fact. It's a statement of how you feel about the person.
Exactly.
Actually, the fact is that he's not probably always doing that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
He's doing
what
it
you're
enough times to annoy you. But
exactly what you're expressing is annoyance by
yeah,
emphasizing the ing. He's always forgetting to
yeah, and the adverb, he's always forgetting.
always forgetting. Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
a student of mine, I knew that she got rhythm and intonation because she did a bit of her schooling in the US in California, and she just said, I've got it. And I said, what do you mean? I remember this moment in high school where this girl, and it's taken me, and it's only now that I really understand what she was saying to me. It was my first day. I was about 16, and I bumped into her, this American high school girl, and she just turned to me and she said, excuse me. She said the way she said excuse me was not how I'd been taught in school in Mexico. It was not, excuse me. It was excuse me, And
Exactly.
it's always stayed with me because it sounds so strange. And it is actually
Yes.
quite an unusual intonation pattern. You would only use it in that situation, really. It's a very aggressive way of saying excuse me. Which is not
Yeah,
normally
and it
thought
is
of something
quite
aggressive.
ironic, right? Oh, am I standing on your
It's
way?
irony. Sarcasm, right?
Exactly.
Not irony.
Not
But
ironic.
yeah, and
You're right. Yeah,
she said it's always
sarcasm.
been there with me because I knew there was something wrong in the way she was treating me. She was, or because it wasn't done with respect. It wasn't said with respect, but it was said with excuse me. Normally is for respect. That's why you say excuse me, because you respect the person. So she finally got it, and that she's away now on her own personal journey of when she hears people use rhythm and intonation without me around, she's going to be saying, that's why they're saying that, But anyway, I hope, because it got very theoretical, and that's what we always, well, not theoretical, it's very practical actually, but the way you and I talk about practical things is quite, we love ideas, don't we?
That's right.
And
That's
it
right.
makes so
I
much
really
sense that
enjoy
you're an
it.
engineer. An engineer, where would we be without engineers? Those people, who have all these complex ideas that we shouldn't have, would
Exactly.
we have bridges?
Exactly.
And all
Well,
the other things, But
yeah,
we should leave it at that because we have been going. We had that technical problem at the beginning, and that's why we're finishing a little bit later. But anyway, Maria Luisa, thank you so much. This month's topic is how do you get to C1? And Andreina last week argued that you need awareness. You need to be able to assess yourself for learning, to learn, because it's beyond self-assessment. And
yes,
your big idea is that you need to think.
yes, yes, you do.
God,
You
really?
need to think, and
Sounds like hard work.
you need to do this constant comparative analysis and be aware,
Yes,
awareness, as Andreina said, of how you're using it.
that's right. And
Right.
next week we'll be looking at something which it was a really difficult concept to get. What do you learn, at any level, but especially, getting up to C1, you have to learn the competencies for C1,
Yes.
what can I do now that I ask my students, what can I do? What can you do now that you weren't able to do a month ago? I know more vocabulary. No, what can you do? Knowing the vocabulary, that's knowing. What can you do? And they're like, sorry, don't get you. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week with
Oh my God.
Alejandro Guzman, I was going to say. No, I wish it was Alejandra Guzman. No offense to Alejandro Ugalde. It will be Alejandro Ugalde from consultancy Esencia Ludica, who speaks beautiful English. And really what we're talking about, though, because he is a consultant on leadership, on teaching people to be leaders and seeing
That's
leadership
great.
as a competency. So he'll be talking about competency, but not from a language teaching perspective. So next week you'll have a break from the language teachers because you'll actually have somebody from real life, and he will be telling us what a competency is. That you cannot really learn anything for real life, because people want things for real life, without knowing what a competency is and knowing what you are learning.
Absolutely. And you know that, oh my God, I will make sure I'll be there because
Well, there will be
That's
the recording. There's always the recording,
exactly,
on
because
my YouTube channel, but
that sort
you
of
can
brings
participate if you're
together.
there.
Yeah, it brings
Mhm.
together what Andreina was mentioning last week,
Sure,
and what we have talked about today.
sure.
And
Why does yeah?
there is an element of attitude in being competent.
That's what Andrina said last week. This
Yeah,
attitude is very important as well. And Alejandro Guzman, no, sorry, Alejandro, it's not Alex Guzman, it's Alex Ugalde.
Ugalde.
Why does he speak beautiful English? Because he knows what a competency is. He knows what to work on, and his English is absolutely beautiful as a result. And he's not an English teacher, he is a trainer. And he probably has trained on leadership in English because he can. And we'll be talking about what it is: a can-do statement, being able to do things rather than knowing things, or compared to knowing things.
Oh,
And
that's great.
a
Well,
competency.
looking
What is a
forward to it.
competency? Do we need
Looking
them?
forward to it.
Okay, so María Luisa, it's just thank you so much. I mean, I think I would have gotten lost on this because myths. Nobody likes questioning myths. You immediately get this kind of like, don't move where everything is. And machismo is perfectly fine for me. I'm not saying that people are necessarily machista, but these ways of living that we have, these things that our granny tells us about language learning, which are obviously universally true because she knows about language learning. Let's just all we're saying, María Luisa, is let's question. Let's think about them because the power is probably in the thinking about it. You don't have to change who you are. You don't have to change what you believe. Let's just think about it. So admit the idea that there may be another way of looking at this.
And you know that something else, we have to learn to unlearn.
That's right. And we say it in my networking group, which is real life, because we're there to do a little bit of business. In BNI, we say, hay que desaprender para aprender.
Exactly.
Every member of BNI, at least in my chapter, we know this, and we're not theoretical. We're there to do business,
Absolutely.
But anyway.
Absolutely. On the contrary, Dara, thank you very much for inviting me and for
guiding us through all of this, because with your such clarity and thinking.
No, it's been so much fun.
María Luisa Castanedo.
No, I used to be. Remember that I used to be.
Oh, you used to be.
Sometime in the past.
Something there in that, in the way you said that. We'll have a talk about that over a coffee.
All right. To. Absolutely. Great. Have a lovely weekend. Thanks everyone that is here.
See you soon. Bye, guys. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.